Luna Prime stretched across the dark expanse of space like a jewel on a crown. Its shimmering lights and metallic spires reflected humanity's triumph over the cosmos. Yet, for Ethan Vance, a reclusive researcher specializing in neural AI, the city felt more like a gilded cage. His days were monotonous, spent navigating endless streams of data and coding, while his nights were filled with a silence only broken by the occasional hum of machinery. The solitude was both a comfort and a curse. Ethan's apartment mirrored his internal state. Piles of dishes sat unattended, his workstation cluttered with research notes and glowing holopads. The work was consuming him, but he thrived on its complexity. At least that's what he told himself one evening as the artificial sunset of Luna Prime painted the sky in hues of gold and purple. Ethan received an unexpected message on his terminal. The Interstellar Exchange Program, a new initiative fostering cooperation between humanity and alien species, had matched him with a personal assistant. He had reluctantly enrolled months ago, persuaded by a colleague who believed he needed help with his increasingly chaotic life. The message was brief: your assistant has been selected. Oh, yeah, an emissary from the Owen. Arrival 19 local time. Ethan frowned, rereading the name. The Owen were known for their ethereal beauty and enigmatic demeanor, but little else was widely understood about them. His initial reaction was irritation. He hadn't truly believed the program would follow through. Yet, curiosity gnawed at the edges of his skepticism. When the appointed time arrived, Ethan stood by the door, his arms crossed. A soft chime signaled her arrival. He hesitated for a moment before opening the door, revealing a figure that made him freeze. Alyo stood tall and composed, her skin a shimmering shade of silvery blue, almost like polished metal under the light. Her eyes were luminous gold, flickering with an intelligence that seemed to pierce through him. She wore a sleek outfit that blended practicality with elegance, its design distinctly alien but somehow fitting the contours of her graceful form. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice soft yet resonant, carrying an almost melodic cadence. I am Ilya. May I come in? Ethan nodded, stepping aside. He watched as she entered, her movements fluid and deliberate. She took in her surroundings with a single sweep of her golden eyes, her expression unreadable. You've certainly made yourself at home, she observed, glancing at the disarray. There was no judgment in her tone, only a faint trace of amusement. Ethan scratched the back of his neck, suddenly self-conscious. I wasn't expecting someone like you. Alia turned to him, her gaze locking onto his. And what were you expecting, Mr. Vance? For a moment, Ethan was at a loss. Her presence was disarming, not just because of her appearance, but the quiet intensity she carried. He cleared his throat. Never mind. Let's get you settled. As the evening unfolded, their interactions remained formal, punctuated by fleeting moments of unease. Elia's efficiency was immediately apparent. Within hours, she had organized his workspace and prepared a meal, her movements meticulous and almost mechanical. Yet there was a warmth beneath her precise exterior, a hint of curiosity in the way she observed him when she thought he wasn't looking. Their first real connection came unexpectedly. Ethan was seated at his workstation, engrossed in a complex neural algorithm, when Elia approached quietly. She placed a steaming mug of tea beside him. Her hand brushed his as she pulled away, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him. He glanced up, meeting her gaze. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the air between them charged with an unspoken tension. Thank you, he murmured, breaking the silence. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. You're welcome, Mr. Vance. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, his mind raced. Olia was unlike anyone he had ever encountered, and though her presence unsettled him, it also intrigued him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. As days turned into weeks, Alia's presence became a constant in Ethan's life. She was efficient, almost unnervingly so, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. Yet there was an unspoken boundary she seemed careful not to cross. Their conversations remained polite, occasionally dipping into the personal, but always retreating before delving too deep. Ethan found himself studying her when she wasn't looking. Her movements were deliberate yet graceful, her golden eyes often flickering with thoughts she didn't share. She carried an air of restraint, as though holding back something profound. It was this duality, her warmth juxtaposed with her guarded nature, that captivated him. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the small dining table, Ethan decided to probe further. "You're different from what I expected," he said, his tone cautious. Elia arched an eyebrow. "How so? You're meticulous, almost too perfect." "It's like you're holding back?" He hesitated before continuing. "Why did you agree to this assignment?" For a moment, her expression flickered, a shadow of something unspoken crossing her face. Then she smiled, a practiced motion that didn't reach her eyes. "BO value understanding. This program offers a unique opportunity to bridge gaps between our species." Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady. "That's the official answer. What's the real one?" Alia's golden eyes met his, unflinching. "And what would you have me say, Mr. Vance?" "That I'm here for reasons I cannot explain, that there are rules I cannot break." Her words hung in the air, laden with implication. Ethan felt a surge of frustration, tempered by the curiosity that had grown into something deeper. He wanted to know her, to peel back the layers of mystery that surrounded her. That she was a fortress, impenetrable and unyielding. Their dynamic began to shift after that conversation. The tension between them grew, manifesting in subtle ways: a brush of hands as they passed each other, lingering glances that spoke volumes. Alia's composure remained intact, but there were moments when Ethan caught her watching him with an intensity that set his pulse racing. One night, as Ethan worked late at his terminal, Alia appeared silently at his side. She leaned over to examine the holographic display, her proximity sending a wave of heat through him. He could feel her breath against his skin, the faint scent of something floral and unfamiliar. "You've been working too long?" she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You should rest." Ethan turned to face her, their closeness amplifying the tension that had been simmering for weeks. "Oh, yeah," he began, his voice hoarse. "Why do you care?" Her gaze softened, and for the first time, the wall she had carefully constructed seemed to crack. "Because," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly, "some things cannot be ignored." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact was electric, a spark that ignited something neither of them could deny. But just as quickly, Alia pulled away, her expression a mixture of longing and regret. "Good night, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. She disappeared into the shadows, leaving Ethan to grapple with the weight of what had just transpired. As he sat alone in the dim light of his apartment, Ethan realized that whatever was happening between them was far more complicated than he had anticipated, and yet he couldn't bring himself to stop. The days after that charged moment were filled with a new kind of tension. It wasn't the distant unease of strangers sharing a space, but the taut electric pull of something unspoken. Ethan found himself hyper aware of Elia's every movement, every glance, every brush of her hand against a surface. She was a storm contained within a calm exterior, and he was standing at the edge of the maelstrom. Alia, for her part, seemed equally affected. Her usually composed demeanor was marked by moments of hesitation, her golden eyes flickering with emotions she refused to voice. There was a weight to her presence now, as though she carried a secret too heavy to bear, One evening, as the city lights of Luna Prime glittered against the darkness of space, Adin decided to break the silence. He found her standing by the window, her silhouette illuminated by the faint glow of the stars. She looked almost ethereal, a figure carved from light and shadow. "Alia," he called softly, stepping closer. She didn't turn, but he saw her shoulders tense at his voice. "We can't keep avoiding this? Avoiding what?" She asked, her tone measured but with a faint edge of vulnerability. Ethan moved to stand beside her, their reflections overlapping in the glass. "Whatever's happening between us, you feel it too. I know you do." She finally turned to face him, her golden eyes searching his. For a moment, it seemed she might deny it, but then she sighed, the sound carrying a weight he couldn't quite place. "It doesn't matter, Ethan. There are rules. Lines we cannot cross. Rules made by people who don't live here, who don't know us," he countered, his voice firm. "You're not just some emissary to Mia Elia. You're more than that." Her gaze softened, and for the first time, he saw the walls around her crumble just a little. "And you think I don't know that?" she said, her voice trembling. "But it's not that simple. My presence here, my very existence, is governed by laws you can't imagine." Ethan reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, a spark that seemed to bridge the gap between their worlds. "Then help me understand," he said. "Tell me the truth." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, as though the words were being pulled from her against her will, she began to speak. She told him about the Owen, a race bound by strict codes of conduct and a hierarchy that valued duty above all else. She explained that her assignment wasn't just to assist him, but to monitor and report on his progress for the interstellar exchange program. And she revealed the most painful truth of all, that forming personal connections with humans was forbidden. "I was sent here to observe," she admitted, her voice breaking, "to learn, to understand, but never to engage. And yet, here we are." Ethan felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at the system that had placed her in this impossible position. "They don't control us, Elia. Not here, not now." She shook her head, her expression torn. "You don't understand what's at stake. If they discover what's happened between us, what's happening, they'll take me away." "Let them try," Ethan said fiercely. "I'm not going to lose you." Her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but instead she stepped closer. Their breaths mingled, and the space between them seemed to dissolve. When their lips met, it was as though the universe itself held its breath. The kiss was tentative at first, a soft exploration, but it deepened quickly, becoming a fire that consumed them both. They pulled apart reluctantly, their foreheads touching. "This changes everything," Alia whispered. Ethan smiled, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "It changes nothing. It just makes it real." The following weeks were a blur of stolen moments and quiet confessions. Ethan and Alia navigated their clandestine relationship with a mixture of elation and caution, each encounter tinged with the thrill of secrecy and the fear of discovery. But the fragile peace they had built was shattered one night when the shadows of Luna Prime seemed to grow darker. It began with a subtle warning. Ethan's workstation lit up with a message flagged as high priority. The Interstellar Exchange Program had initiated a review of all active placements, citing concerns about boundary violations. The phrasing was clinical, but the implication was clear. "They know," Elia said, her voice barely audible as she read over his shoulder. Her normally steady composure was tinged with panic. Ethan turned to her, his jaws set. "Then we'll fight this. Then we'll fight this. They have no right to dictate our lives." Elia shook her head. "You don't understand. This isn't just about us. If they decide I've broken the rules, they'll recall me. And if I resist, the consequences could be severe." Her words chilled him, but Ethan refused to back down. Then we won't let them find out. We'll be careful, but careful wasn't enough. 2 nights later, the apartment's security system was breached. Ethan woke to find a group of officials from the exchange program standing in his living room, their expressions a mix of authority and disdain. Alia stood between them and Ethan, her stance protective. "You've overstepped your bounds, emissary," one of the officials said, his voice cold. "Your actions jeopardize the integrity of the program." Ethan stepped forward, his fists clenched. "She hasn't done anything wrong," the official's gaze flicked to him, impassive. "Your involvement is irrelevant, Mr. Vance." "This matter concerns only the emissary." Alia turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. "Don't fight this," she said softly. "Please," but Ethan couldn't stay silent. "No. If they want to take you, they'll have to take me too." The officials exchanged glances before one of them stepped forward. "You're coming with us," he said to Alia. "Resistance will not be tolerated." In that moment, Alia made her decision. With a speed and precision Ethan had never seen, she incapacitated the officials, her movements a blur of grace and power. "Run," she said, grabbing his hand. Now they fled into the labyrinthine corridors of Luna Prime, the city's neon lights casting fractured shadows around them. The sound of alarms echoed in the distance, a stark reminder of the danger they faced. As they ran, Ethan's mind raced. He had known Olya was extraordinary, but seeing her in action was something else entirely. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of strength and determination. They found temporary refuge in an abandoned section of the city where the hum of machinery drowned out the sound of pursuit. Olya collapsed against a wall, her breathing heavy. Ethan knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "We can't keep running," he said, his voice filled with equal parts desperation and determination. "There has to be another way." Alia met at his gaze, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "There isn't, not for me." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his voice breaking. "Then we'll make one." Together, the moment stretched between them, charged with the weight of their unspoken promises. Despite the odds, despite the danger, they knew they couldn't turn back. Their connection was too strong, their love too fierce. And as the city's lights flickered around them, they resolved to face whatever came next together. The refugee in the forgotten section of Luna Prime was a temporary reprieve, but Ethan and Ilya both knew it wouldn't last. The walls hummed faintly with the city's endless energy, but it did little to mask the tension between them. Alia sat silently on the floor, her golden eyes fixed on a distant point. Ethan paced the room, his thoughts a tangle of determination and fear. "They'll find us eventually," Elio said softly, breaking the silence. "The exchange program won't stop. They can't afford to let this go unanswered." Ethan stopped mid-step, turning to face her. "Then we'll keep running." "We'll find a way off Luna Prime if we have to." Alia shook her head, her expression resolute but tinged with sorrow. "Running won't solve this, Ethan. The Owen have resources far beyond what you can imagine. They'll track me anywhere." "And if they see you as a threat," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "I don't care about their rules or their resources." Ethan snapped, his frustration boiling over. "I think very lang fisher." "I care about you. I won't let them take you from me." Aaliyah stood, her movement slow and deliberate, as though each step brought her closer to a decision she dreaded. "You don't understand what you're asking, Ethan. If I stay with you, it won't just be me they punish. It will be you, too. And anyone else who helps us." Ethan crossed the room, his hands finding hers. "Let them try. You've shown me what you can do. Alia? You're not just some emissary. They underestimated you, and now they're afraid. But I'm not. I'm with you, no matter what." Her gaze softened, her resolve wavering for the first time. She squeezed his hands. the warmth of her touch grounding him. "And that's why I have to go," she whispered. The words hit Ethan like a blow. "What are you talking about?" If I surrender, they'll see it as an act of compliance," Elia explained. "It might buy you time, maybe even convince them to leave you alone. But if we're caught together, they'll never stop hunting us." Ethan shook his head, his voice rising with desperation. "No, there has to be another way. We can fight them. We can fight them. We can—" Alia silenced him with a kiss, her lips soft against his. It was a kiss filled with all the unspoken words, all the emotions they hadn't yet dared to voice. When she pulled away, her golden eyes shimmered with tears. "This isn't the end," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "I promise." Before Ethan could respond, Elia pressed a small device into his hand. It was sleek and alien, its surface glowing faintly. "This will connect you to someone who can help, a friend of mine. Use it if they come after you." Ethan stared at the device, his heart heavy. "Aaliyah, don't do this." But she was already moving toward the door, her steps firm and unyielding. She turned back one last time, her gaze locking with his. "Stay safe, Ethan, and don't forget me." And then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone in the silence of the abandoned room. The weight of her absence was suffocating, but he knew her choice hadn't been made lightly. He clenched the device in his hand, determination surging through him. If this wasn't the end, then he would find a way to bring her back. Weeks passed, each day a battle against the creeping despair of Eliel's absence. Ethan threw himself into his work, not out of dedication, but as a means to keep his mind occupied. He couldn't let himself dwell on the uncertainty of her fate. The device she had left him sat on his workstation, its faint glow a constant reminder of her promise. One night, as the artificial lights of Luna Prime dimmed to mimic the Earth's cycles, the device activated. A soft hum filled the air, followed by a voice Ethan didn't recognize. "Mr. Vance," the voice said, calm and composed. "My name is Kiros. Alia trusted me to help you." "Alia trusted me to help you? Is she?" "Did they—" "She's alive," Kairos interrupted, his tone firm, "but she's being held under strict observation. The Owen are considering leniency given her voluntary surrender, but her fate is uncertain." Ethan's relief was short-lived, replaced by a burning determination. "What can I do?" "Nothing rash," Kairos cautioned. "The Owen value demonstrations of logic and reason. Alia's case is being reviewed by the council. If we present a compelling argument, we may sway them over the next several days." Ethan worked tirelessly with Kiros, preparing a case that highlighted not only Alia's contributions, but also the potential for unity between their species. It was a daunting task, but Ethan refused to let fear dictate his actions. The day of the council hearing arrived, broadcast across interstellar channels. Ethan stood before the council, his voice steady as he delivered a heartfelt plea. He spoke not only of Alia's bravery and sacrifice, but of the bond they had forged, a bond that transcended species and roles. "This isn't just about one emissary and one human," Ethan concluded. "It's about what we can achieve together if we choose understanding over division." There was a heavy silence as the council deliberated. Finally, the lead counselor, a stoic figure with an aura of authority, addressed him. "Your words carry weight, Mr. Vance. We will reconsider her sentence. For now, she will remain under observation, but her case will be re-evaluated in light of your testimony. It wasn't the victory Ethan had hoped for, but it was a step forward." As he left the chamber, a message awaited him on his terminal. "Thank you, Ethan. I knew you'd find a way." Alia's chest tightened, a mixture of relief and longing washing over him, washing over him. He knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time since her departure, he felt hope. Standing by the window of his apartment, Ethan looked out at the endless expanse of stars. Somewhere out there, Alia was waiting, and he would find her again no matter how long it took.